Welcome to Making IT Work, Deep Creek Center's blog for IT professionals committed to using best practices to provide exceptional value for their business clients.
Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to continue our conversation about engagement, and today we're going to talk specifically about the development of service relationships. So, prior discussions we've had about customer journeys began with exploration, where the customer is trying to find potential alternatives, and we as a service provider may be trying to find customers. We then began our conversation around engagement, looking at communications, collaboration, listening skills, and other kinds of capabilities we might need to be able to successfully engage in relationships with customers, suppliers, and other stakeholders. Today, we're going to expand that conversation by talking a little bit about different service relationship types, how relationship management practices perform different kinds of important roles, and introducing a notion called the service relationship ladder that may then describe a sequence of activities we might engage in for the purpose of helping to build relationship and set the stage for having meaningful conversations with customers about how we might help meet their needs. So we introduced the idea of service relationship types at the end of the previous blog, and we talked about them as having three main kinds. In a basic relationship, effectively the nature of the relationship is either very ad hoc or takes on the role of an order taker, when someone provides me an order and we do fulfillment against the order. There's not a whole lot of strategic value there, but in certain circumstances, this may meet the need for certain customer requirements and for certain service provider needs as well. A more collaborative relationship helps to expand this more into a service provider or even fully trusted advisor role, where we are getting more and more focused not just on the provisioning of certain capabilities and deliverables, but more broadly on helping to facilitate customer outcomes, and perhaps even more to get involved in strategic benefits for how the customer uses our outcomes to help drive strategic value to their organizations. A third type of relationship, a partnership model, fundamentally recognizes the relationship that both parties have to the strategic goals and objectives of one another, and engages that relationship early and frequently, not only in responding to needs, but potentially identifying and surfacing different opportunities and different demands where we might be able to create certain levels of value for the customer. In the ITIL 4 guidance, we introduce a practice called relationship management, which really builds on the previous ITIL's guidance on business relationship management. Here, we start to connect ourselves with other best practice frameworks like the Business Relationship Professional BRM Institute. And in this case, they look at relationship management as the combination of three sets of activities, serving as a connector, an orchestrator, and a navigator. As a connector, we're really interested in understanding and potentially shaping the demand for our services and providing guidance and wisdom within the service provider to be able to provision an appropriate level of supply to meet that demand. There is also a meaningful level of influence involved here, as we work together with various stakeholders to encourage them to consider certain alternatives and how we might in turn then be able to provision certain capabilities that would enable us to serve certain types of strategic needs that our customers have. The orchestrator role, as the name implies, allows us to orchestrate the various roles and responsibilities, resources and capabilities that will be needed to ensure that we can actually understand the customer's goals and outcomes, and that we can provision and deliver the right resources, the right capabilities to provision services that will help co-create value. The third role as navigator helps us to facilitate a convergence across the customer and service provider lines to ensure that the right communications, the right collaboration is being had tactically and operationally in how we engage with the customer, and how we then use that to potentially surface additional capabilities and needs. The other key idea today is looking at this idea of the service relationship ladder. The service relationship ladder helps us think about what are the real stages or steps we have to follow to be able to build relationship with a customer. All right, so this, of course, begins with having the right kinds of environments to enable these types of relationship patterns to emerge so that we can find one another. This might include identifying certain marketplaces where our information is made available to customers looking for us, as well as various market spaces where we may engage directly with customer stakeholders of various kinds so we can meet one another and start to understand a little bit about what they might want. From there, it's really about building transparency, building trust, and building the nature of the relationship. Does this particular stakeholder, for example, have the right level of capability, the right level of commitment, the right level of consistency to be able to sustainably deliver value for me and enable me to achieve the value and outcomes I want as a customer? So this then leads to conversations about the service provider's capabilities. What capabilities and resources can they bring to bear? And how will these help me to achieve my goals? So again, you can think about the service provider capabilities using the 4 dimensions model from IDLE 4. So what does this mean in the context of the people and organizations we use? What is the context of various information and technology and how it gets leveraged? What is the role of various suppliers, partners, and partner channel models and how that helps support the overall value proposition? And what are the value streams and processes that we'll need to leverage and use in order to be able to deliver the results that are needed? From there, we can also then look very explicitly at the customer's unique needs. What are the things that drive value for them? From the service itself to the outcomes that service is supposed to facilitate, to how the organization uses that service to serve downstream to their own customers, and how does that help them meet their own strategic needs. Ultimately, it becomes a question of managing the balance of cost, risk, and value, and to be able to ensure that the service provider, has the experiences that we need and can meet our organizational preferences for how we want the service to be delivered for us. Lastly, it really becomes a question of understanding the nature of the service relationship type that makes the most sense in the concept of this engagement model. Is this a relationship that should be handled as a basic relationship or more or less a transactional one? Is this a situation where the risk is higher, the potential value is higher, and a more collaborative relationship is appropriate? Because we want the service provider to become more committed and more engaged, not only in provisioning a service, but in helping us to ensure that we meet our desired outcomes. In a partnership model, we're dealing with the situations where the risk and the cost are the highest, and generally the value is the highest as well. From the customer's perspective, they're going to want to do a tremendous amount of due diligence to make sure that they understand that this particular service provider is going to be able to meet their needs for a long period of time. In many cases, it's very, very painful and very impactful if I have to change providers. So it's going to be very important to do my homework up front to make sure I don't have to do that. Likewise, we as a service provider are making a large and substantial commitment to this customer, not just today and not just for the existing service, but for being able to grow and evolve our capabilities to continue to align and meet the strategic needs of this customer.
Thank you for joining us today. Deep Creek Center provides consulting and training for businesses around the world. For more information, visit deepcreekcenter.com.